Mutinta, if you can't afford the rent, perhaps you should find an address that matches your reality.
Losing my job did not take away my dignity.
So, you've decided to move forward?
Yes, I'm ready to build something new. Mutinta, I need your help. I remember what you said when I needed yours.
She had lost her job, not her dignity. Years later, Thandiwe would walk into Mutinta's sophisticated design studio, needing the help of the very woman she had humiliated. The glass walls of Thandiwe Mulenga's Ibex Hill townhouse reflected the warm lights of Lusaka like polished gold. Inside, soft jazz floated beneath the conversations of architects, property investors, boutique owners, and women dressed in vivid chitenge gowns tailored with the precision of evening couture. Crystal glasses rested on marble side tables. Brass lamps glowed beside sculptural furniture imported from Johannesburg. Everything in the room seemed designed to communicate one message: success lived here. Mutinta Chisanga wished she passed through the foyer without being noticed. She had just returned from another interview, still wearing an emerald chitenge dress beneath a cream blazer. Her heels were clean, her posture composed, but the folder beneath her arm felt heavier than it should have. Inside were copies of her resume, letters of recommendation, and the portfolio she had once presented with confidence. Tonight, none of them had earned her a job. In her other hand, Mutinta carried a worn burgundy fabric sample book from her years working in interior design. She kept it because she could not bring herself to throw away the physical evidence of a career she had worked so hard to build. She was only a few steps from the staircase when Thandiwe's voice cut across the room. Mutinta. The conversations around them did not stop completely, but they softened. Mutinta turned. Thandiwe Mulenga stood near a sculptural dining table in a tailored cobalt blue chitenge suit with gold earrings brushing her jawline. She held herself with the effortless authority of a woman accustomed to being listened to. "Yes, Madam Mulenga?" Thandiwe smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I have been trying to reach you." Mutinta's stomach tightened. "I saw your messages. I was at an interview." Mutinta hesitated. They said they still have other candidates to meet. Thandiwe gave a small nod, as though Mutinta had just confirmed something disappointing but predictable. "I see." Mutinta lowered her voice. "I know what this is about. I transferred most of the rent yesterday. I am still waiting for payment from a freelance project, but I can clear the balance as soon as it arrives." Thandiwe's eyes flicked toward the guests. "You said something similar last week." "I know, and the week before that." Mutinta inhaled slowly. "The company I worked for restructured. I did not expect to lose my position so suddenly." Thandiwe's expression hardened. "Unexpected things happen to everyone." Mutinta looked at her. "I understand. Do you?" There was enough sharpness in the question to make a woman near the window glance over. Mutinta felt heat rise beneath her collar. "Madam Mulenga, I am not refusing to pay you. No, you are simply asking me to finance your difficulty. That is not what I am asking." "Then what are you asking?" "A little time." Thandiwe laughed softly. "A little time." The words landed in the room like something unpleasant placed on a polished surface. Mutinta tightened her grip on the burgundy sample book. She had been careful not to ask friends for money. She had reduced every unnecessary expense. She had sold designer handbags she once bought with her first promotion bonus. She had stopped taking taxis unless absolutely necessary. She cooked every meal at home and had even delayed replacing a cracked phone screen. Still, there was something about being financially vulnerable that made other people imagine carelessness where there had only been bad timing. "I will pay you," Mutinta said. "I just need a few more days." Thandiwe placed her glass on the table. Then she spoke loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Don't stand in my beautiful home pretending you belong here, Mutinta. If you cannot afford the rent, perhaps you should find an address that matches your reality." The room went still. Mutinta felt the humiliation before she fully understood the words. A man near the bar looked down at his drink. Two women beside the sofa exchanged a glance. Someone turned away. Mutinta stared at Thandiwe, not because she had no answer, because she had too many. She could have reminded the woman that she had paid on time for nearly 2 years before losing her job. She could have said that one bad season did not erase years of discipline. She could have asked why a private financial matter needed an audience. Instead, Mutinta chose the one thing Thandiwe could not take from her composure. She straightened her shoulders. "You are right about one thing," she said quietly. Thandiwe lifted one eyebrow. "And what is that?" "I may need another address." A faint smile appeared on Thandiwe's lips. Mutinta continued, "But an address has never decided who I am." The smile disappeared. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then, a voice came from near the dining table. "Excuse me?" Mutinta turned. A tall woman in a rust orange wrap dress was standing a few feet away. Mutinta recognized her vaguely as one of the guests who had arrived earlier carrying upholstery swatches. The woman's eyes were not on Thandiwe. They were on the burgundy book in Mutinta's hands. "Is that the Mosey collection?" she asked. Mutinta blinked. "Yes. I thought they stopped printing those samples." "They did." The woman stepped closer. "You work in interiors?" "I did." Mutinta paused. "I still do when I can find the work." The woman held out her hand. "Chanda Fury." Mutinta shook it. "Mutinta Chisanga." Chanda glanced at the portfolio beneath Mutinta's arm. "You have your work in there?" "Yes." "Good." Thandiwe's expression changed slightly. "Chanda, we were discussing a private matter." Chanda looked at her. "Then perhaps it should have remained private." Silence returned. Mutinta looked down, not wanting anyone to see the gratitude that suddenly threatened her composure. Chanda reached into her handbag and removed a business card. "I run an upholstery workshop in Kabulonga," she said. "One of my clients needs someone who understands space planning and finishes. Send me 3 examples of your work." Mutinta stared at the card. "You are offering me a project. I am offering you a conversation." Chanda smiled. "What happens after that depends on your work." Something inside Mutinta shifted, not relief, not yet, something smaller, possibility. She accepted the card carefully. "Thank you." Chanda nodded. "Do not thank me before I have seen the portfolio." That made Mutinta smile for the first time that evening. Thandiwe watched the exchange without speaking. Mutinta turned toward the staircase. Her rent problem had not disappeared. Her job had not returned. Her future was still uncertain. But as she climbed toward the apartment, she might soon have to leave. The burgundy sample book no longer felt like evidence of the life she had lost. It felt like something else, a door that had not opened yet. Mutinta Chisanga sat at the small marble breakfast counter in her Ibex Hill apartment, staring at the cream envelope Thandiwe Mulenga had slid beneath her door. The apartment was quiet. Morning light spilled through the sheer curtains and touched the emerald cushion covers. Mutinta had sewn herself during happier months. A brass-framed mirror reflected the room back at her, the sculptural lamp she had found at a local design market, the narrow walnut console she had restored by hand, the woven basket from Mongu, the burgundy sample book resting beside her laptop. It was not the most expensive apartment in Lusaka, but Mutinta had made it beautiful. That was why the envelope hurt. She opened it slowly. The language was formal. The remaining rent balance had not been settled within the agreed period. Under the terms of the tenancy agreement, Thandiwe would not renew the arrangement, and Mutinta was expected to make plans to vacate. Mutinta read the notice twice. Then she placed it flat on the counter. There was no screaming, no dramatic threat, no illegal eviction. Just ink, signatures, and the cold reality that numbers did not care how carefully she had arranged the room around them. Her phone vibrated. A message from Chanda Fury. "Send the portfolio when you are ready." Mutinta stared at it. For several seconds she did nothing. Then came a knock. She already knew who it was. When Mutinta opened the door, Thandiwe stood outside wearing a beautifully tailored mustard and navy chitin dress, a structured handbag resting against one arm. "Good," Thandiwe said. "You received it." "I did. I wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding." "There isn't." Thandiwe studied her face. Mutinta wondered whether the woman had expected tears, perhaps anger, perhaps another request. Instead, Mutinta stepped aside. "Would you like to come in?" Thandiwe seemed surprised. "For what?" "So we can discuss the handover properly." After a brief hesitation, she entered. Her eyes moved across the apartment. Mutinta noticed that people often did. Even with modest furniture, the room looked intentional. Nothing was random. Colors repeated softly from one corner to another. The room felt warmer than its size suggested. Thandiwe ran her fingers along the edge of the restored walnut console. You did this. I refinished it. Mutinta closed the door. I can move out within the notice period. I will also settle what remains of the rent. Thandiwe turned. With what income? Mutinta held her gaze. With whatever work I secure. That is not a plan. It is the plan I have. Thandiwe sighed. This is what I was trying to tell you downstairs. Mutinta's jaw tightened. No, downstairs, you were trying to embarrass me. I was trying to make you understand reality. In front of your guests, sometimes discomfort teaches what politeness cannot. Mutinta was silent. Thandiwe continued. When I was your age, nobody gave me extra time. Nobody cared that I was tired. I worked until I could afford the life I wanted. I respect that. Then learn from it. Mutinta looked around the apartment and she was about to lose. You assume I haven't worked hard because I am struggling now. I assume results matter. So do circumstances. Thandiwe's expression cooled. That is what people say when they want circumstances to carry responsibility for them. Mutinta almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she suddenly understood something. Thandiwe was not speaking to her. She was speaking to some younger version of herself she had spent decades trying to escape. Mutinta softened slightly. I am not asking you to renew the lease. Thandiwe blinked. I know. I am saying you did not need to humiliate me. For the first time, Thandiwe looked uncomfortable, only for a second. Then the armor returned. Maybe discomfort will finally teach you ambition. Mutinta stared at her. That sentence hurt more than the notice. Not because it was true, because it dismissed everything she had already survived. The extra shifts, the unpaid hospital balances, the interviews, the freelance proposals, the night spent adjusting budgets until the numbers blurred. Mutinta walked to the dining table and picked up the burgundy sample book. You know what is strange? Thandiwe said nothing. I used to think ambition meant reaching a certain kind of address. She glanced toward the windows overlooking the manicured compound. Now I think ambition is knowing when an address is costing you too much. Thandiwe frowned. What is that supposed to mean? It means I will leave. Mutinta's voice remained calm. But I will not leave believing that losing this apartment means I have failed at life. Thandiwe picked up her handbag. Believe whatever helps you move forward. She walked toward the door, then paused. You are talented, Mutinta. But talent does not protect people from consequences. Mutinta nodded. No. And money does not protect people from becoming cruel. Thandiwe turned. The air between them tightened. Mutinta did not apologize. Neither did Thandiwe. Then the landlady left. The apartment became quiet again. Mutinta stood by the door for several moments before locking it. Then she moved. Not emotionally, practically. She photographed the sofa and listed it for sale. She called a smaller studio complex in Chelston, where the rent was less than half what she currently paid. She folded her clothing into 2 suitcases. The decorative pieces she could carry went into boxes. The expensive ones she could not justify keeping were listed online. By midday, the apartment already looked less like a home and more like a place preparing to become someone else's. Mutinta stopped beside the wall where 3 framed design sketches had hung. She removed them carefully. The empty rectangles left behind looked strangely personal. Her phone rang. Sanda. Mutinta answered. Hello, did you send the portfolio? Not yet. Why? Mutinta looked at the boxes around her. I'm moving. There was a pause. Everything all right? No, another pause. Then Chanda asked the question Mutinta did not expect. Do you still have the portfolio? Mutinta looked at the folder lying beside the burgundy sample book. Yes. Then the important part is still with you. Mutinta swallowed. Chanda continued. I am not offering charity, Mutinta. My client has a problem. If your work can solve it, you get paid. If it cannot, you do not. A small smile appeared on Mutinta's face. That is surprisingly comforting. It should be. Chanda laughed softly. Send me 3 projects, not 10. I want to see whether you know how to edit your own work. I will. And Mutinta? Yes? Do not send me the projects you think look expensive. Mutinta frowned. What should I send? The ones where you solve the hardest problems. The call ended. Mutinta stood in the middle of the half-packed apartment. That sentence stayed with her. Not the expensive projects, the difficult ones. She sat down at her laptop. For the next hour, she ignored the boxes. She opened old folders. A narrow restaurant she had made feel spacious. A family home where she had redesigned the lighting without increasing the budget. A boutique office where locally woven textiles had replaced imported wall coverings. 3 problems, 3 solutions, 3 pieces of evidence that she still knew how to create value. Mutinta attached them to an email. Before sending it, she looked around the apartment one last time. The room was slowly disappearing. But for the first time since the notice arrived, she did not feel like her life was shrinking with it. She pressed send. Then she placed the burgundy sample book carefully into the first box marked work. Not memories, not failure, work. Whatever address came next, that part of her was coming too. Mutinta Chisanga stood outside a newly renovated boutique guest house in Kabulonga, holding her burgundy fabric sample book against her chest. The building was beautiful but unfinished. Its white exterior rose behind a landscaped courtyard filled with young palms, sculptural planters, and polished stone pathways. Through the tall glass entrance, Mutinta could see workers carrying furniture across a spacious lobby where brass pendant lights hung above an unfinished reception desk. She adjusted the sleeve of her coral and emerald chitenji blouse. 3 weeks had passed since she left Ibas Hill. Her new studio apartment in Charleston was smaller than the bedroom she once rented from Thandiwe, but it was clean, affordable, and hers for as long as she could keep paying for it. More importantly, she had stopped waking every morning feeling ashamed of where she lived. Mutinta, she turned. Chanda Firi approached in a rust-colored wrap dress, carrying 2 upholstery folders beneath one arm. You came early. I did not want to be late. Chanda smiled. Nervous? Very good. Mutinta frowned. Good? Nervous people prepare. Chanda pushed open the glass door. Come. Inside, the lobby smelled of fresh timber and paint. The guest house owner wanted elegance without making the property feel like another anonymous luxury hotel. Locally woven baskets had been selected for wall installations, and several pieces of Zambian artwork leaned against one wall waiting to be hung. Mutinta immediately began looking around, not admiring, assessing. A man stood near the reception desk studying architectural drawings. He wore a charcoal linen shirt with tailored trousers and spoke quietly to an electrician before turning toward them. Lungu, Chanda called. He walked over. Chanda, this is Mutinta Chisanga. Lungu Mwape extended his hand. Your portfolio caused an argument. Mutinta blinked. That sounds promising. Chanda laughed. I told him you were good, and I said portfolios are designed to make people look good. Lungu replied. Mutinta shook his hand. So which one of you won? Neither. His expression remained serious, although amusement appeared briefly in his eyes. That is why you are higher. Mutinta liked that answer. No exaggerated praise, no sympathy. No questions about why someone with her experience currently had no permanent employer, just work. Lungu spread the floor plans across a temporary table. The owner wants this lobby finished without increasing the current budget. Mutinta studied the drawings. What is the problem? Everything. Chanda sighed. That is architect language for we spend too much money somewhere else. Lungu ignored her. The furniture has already been ordered. Lighting has been approved. Upholstery is partly in production. Mutinta looked toward the ceiling, then toward the tall windows. She walked several steps into the lobby. May I? Lungu gestured for her to continue. Mutinta moved between the furniture positions marked on the floor. She opened her sample book comparing fabrics against the stone and tea finishes. Then she stopped beneath one of the pendant lights. Who approved these? I did, Lungu said. Mutinta looked at him. They are beautiful, I hear a but this lobby will feel darker than your drawing suggests. Lungu folded his arms. Why? The render assumes consistent daylight. She pointed toward the windows. But look at the depths of that veranda. It shades most of the glazing. That was intentional. Heat control. I know. She walked toward the reception desk, and during brighter months, it will work beautifully. But when the skies are heavier, especially through the rainy season, this area will lose warmth. Lungu studied the ceiling. The electrical plan is already installed. I am not suggesting you change it. Then what are you suggesting? Mutinta opened the burgundy book. Change what the light touches. Chanda stepped closer. Mutinta pulled out a warm sand-colored upholstery sample. You currently have cool gray fabric selected for those lounge chairs. Yes, Chanda said. Replace it with this. She placed another sample beside it. Use the deeper copper textile on the smaller pieces. Then introduce brushed brass around the reception desk rather than more black metal. Lungu looked between the samples and the room. That does not create more light. No, Mutinta smiled. It creates the perception of warmth without changing the electrical system. Chanda nodded slowly. And both fabrics are from my local stock. Exactly. No new import costs. Exactly. Lungu said nothing. He walked toward the windows, then turned and looked back across the lobby. Mutinta waited. She had learned years ago that good ideas did not become better because someone kept explaining them. Finally, Lungu returned. What about the wall behind reception? Mutinta glanced at the large blank surface. What was planned? Imported decorative panels? No, cancel them, Chanda grinned. Lungu raised an eyebrow. You enjoy spending other people's savings. I enjoy not spending money unnecessarily. What would you use? Mutinta looked toward several baskets, leaning against another wall. Those? The baskets? Not exactly those pieces. Commission a coordinated installation from local weavers. Different depths, control palette, asymmetrical arrangement. She traced the shape in the air with one hand. It will create texture under the existing lighting and give guests something connected to where they actually are. Lungu looked at Chanda. She always like this? I met her once. Chanda smiled. But I am beginning to hope so. Mutinta laughed despite herself. For the next several minutes, the three moved through the lobby. Mutinta suggested rearranging 2 chairs rather than purchasing an additional sofa. She found a way to reuse timber left from the reception construction for narrow display shelves. She recommended changing the placement of artwork rather than buying more pieces. None of the ideas were dramatic. That was precisely the point. Good design, Mutinta believed, was not about making people notice how much money had been spent. It was about making them feel that nothing had been wasted. Eventually, Lungu closed the floor plan. I need someone to coordinate finishes through completion. Mutinta's heartbeat quickened. Chanda said, I was going to hire someone from my regular team. Mutinta nodded. Understood. I changed my mind. She looked at him. Lungu continued. The contract is short. Payment is tied to deliverables. I expect documentation, supplier coordination, site visits, and no disappearing when contractors become difficult. I do not disappear. Everyone says that before contractors become difficult. Chanda laughed. Mutinta held out her hand. Then you will have an opportunity to test the claim. For the first time, Lungu smiled openly. He shook her hand. Send me your fee proposal. Mutinta hesitated. You want me to quote? Of course. She had expected him to tell her what I was willing to pay. That was how desperation often worked. People assumed unemployed professionals would accept whatever was offered. What if my fee is higher than you expect? Then I negotiate. And if we cannot agree, I hire someone else. Mutinta nodded slowly. There was something deeply respectful about the simplicity of it. No rescue, no favor. No debt disguised as kindness. A professional problem. A professional opportunity. As Chanda and Lungu walked toward the reception desk to inspect fabric measurements, Mutinta remained behind for a moment. She looked down at the burgundy sample book. Thandiwe had seen it in her hands and seen a woman who could not pay her rent. Chanda had seen it and asked what Mutinta could do. That difference suddenly seemed enormous. Mutinta opened the book and ran her fingers across the worn samples. Her circumstances had changed, her ability had not. And perhaps rebuilding her life would begin not when someone decided to save her, but when she stopped confusing a difficult season with the end of her story. Mutinta Chisanga sat at a narrow wooden desk inside her Chelstone studio apartment, surrounded by fabric samples, supplier catalogs, handwritten measurements, and 3 cups of tea she had forgotten to finish. Rain pressed softly against the window. Her apartment was nothing like the elegant place she had left in Ibex Hills. There was no marble breakfast counter, no landscaped courtyard beyond tall glass doors, no carefully illuminated entrance. Her bed stood only a few steps from her workspace. A compact kitchenette occupied one wall. Above the desk, Mutinta had pinned sketches, material samples, invoices, and photographs from the Kapbolonga guest house. Yet the small room had begun to feel more like hers than the expensive apartment ever had. Her laptop chimed. An email. Mutinta opened it quickly. Then her shoulders dropped. The prospective client had chosen another designer. She read the polite rejection twice before closing the screen. Wonderful, she murmured. Another opportunity to build character. Her phone rang almost immediately. Chanda. Mutinta answered. Please tell me you are calling with money. Chanda laughed. I was calling about cushions. Cushions are acceptable. Money would be better. You sound tired. I am tired. What happened? Mutinta leaned back. The residential client chose someone else. The one in Roma? Yes. Did they say why? They wanted someone with a larger studio. Chanda became quiet. Mutinta glanced around her apartment. They probably imagined this. They did not see your apartment. They saw my business address. Ah, Mutinta rubbed her forehead. I knew rebuilding would be difficult. I just did not realize how often people would confuse appearance with competence. Chanda laughed softly. You lived with Thandiwe and still did not learn that? Mutinta smiled despite herself. Apparently, I require repeated lessons. Then here is another one. The guest house owner wants additional work. Mutinta straightened. What kind? Too sweet. Why? Because guests have been complimenting the lobby. Mutinta became still. They have? Apparently, people keep asking who designed it. I did not design the whole lobby. You coordinated the final finishes. With you and Lungu. Yes, Mutinta. This is usually how professional credit works. Several people can deserve it without fighting. Mutinta laughed. I am still learning. I noticed. Chanda explained that the owner wanted the same visual language carried into 2 premium suites without replacing furniture that had already been purchased. Mutinta pulled a notebook closer. Sent me photographs. Already did. Her laptop chimed. Mutinta opened the images. The rooms were spacious but visually cold. Pale walls, generic furniture, beautiful windows, little personality. She began thinking immediately. The headboards can stay. I thought you would say that. The bedside tables too. Lungu wanted to replace them. Lungu enjoys spending money when it involves timber. I heard that. Mutinta froze. A deeper voice had entered the call. Is Lungu with you? Chanda sounded far too pleased. He just arrived at the workshop. Lungu spoke again. For the record, good timber is an investment. For the record, Mutinta replied, clients cannot sleep on architectural principles. Chanda burst out laughing. Lungu sighed. I am surrounded by disrespect. You will survive. Probably. The lightness of the exchange surprised Mutinta. There had been a period after losing her job when every conversation felt like an evaluation of whether she was succeeding or failing. With Chanda and Lungu, work was simply work. Ideas could be challenged without making the person behind them feel small. Lungu returned to the project. The owner also wants artwork. Local? Preferably. I know a ceramic artist whose wall pieces could work. Price? Reasonable. Send details. Mutinta wrote another note. They discussed fabrics, delivery schedules, and the possibility of using Chanda's workshop for custom bench cushions. When the call ended, Mutinta remained at her desk. One rejected project, one new project. This, she was beginning to understand, was what rebuilding actually looked like. Not a straight line, not one miraculous opportunity followed by endless success. A door closed, another opened halfway. Then she had to push. Her phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message from her former colleague, Mwansa. Someone gave me your number. Are you taking private clients now? Mutinta stared at the question. Was she? She had been describing herself as a freelancer because it sounded temporary enough to protect her from embarrassment if things failed. Taking private clients sounded different. It sounded like a business. Mutinta typed, "Yes, what do you need?" The reply came quickly. A couple had purchased a modern townhouse and wanted help furnishing the living and dining areas. They needed someone practical because their budget had already been stretched by the property purchase. Mutinta smiled. Practical. Months earlier, she might have heard that word as a polite way of saying inexpensive. Now she heard something else. A problem she knew how to solve. She opened a spreadsheet. Income from the guest house project, expected expenses, rent, transportation, software subscription, printing, supplier deposits. The numbers were still tight. There was no dramatic transformation hiding inside them. But for the first time, they were moving in the right direction. A knock sounded at her door. Mutinta frowned. She was not expecting anyone. When she opened it, Chanda stood outside, holding a large rolled textile beneath one arm. "What are you doing here?" "Delivering something." "You could have sent a driver. I wanted to see the famous office." Mutinta stepped aside. Chanda entered and looked around. "This is it?" "This is it. Bedroom, office, and showroom, and occasionally dining room. Very efficient." Mutinta rolled her eyes. Chanda placed the textile on the desk. It was a magnificent hand-woven piece in deep copper, burgundy, cream, and muted green. Mutinta touched it carefully. "This is beautiful. A cooperative outside Lusaka made it. What is it for?" "Your wall." "My wall?" Chanda pointed toward the empty space above the desk. "Every designer needs something beautiful where she works." Mutinta shook her head. "I cannot accept expensive gifts." "It is not expensive. I know textiles." "Fine, it is moderately expensive." "Chanda." The older woman sighed. "Then consider it payment." "For what?" "For introducing me to Lungu's guest house project." "You introduced me." "Yes, but now my workshop has orders for 2 suites." Mutinta smiled. "That logic is suspicious." "Except the textile." Mutinta looked at the piece again. "Thank you." They hung it together. Immediately the room changed. Not because the textile was luxurious, because something intentional now occupied the blank wall. Chanda stepped back. "Better. Much." Her eyes moved to the burgundy sample book on the desk. "You still carry that everywhere?" "Yes." "Why?" Mutinta considered the question. "At first, because I was afraid I might need to prove I had once been somebody." Chanda looked at her. "And now?" Mutinta touched its worn cover. "Now it reminds me that I still am." Chanda smiled. "That is a better answer." After she left, Mutinta returned to her laptop. She created a new folder. For several seconds, she stared at the blank naming field. Then she typed Mutinta Interiors. She almost deleted it. The name seemed too ambitious for one woman working beside her bed. But ambition, she had learned, did not require a glamorous address. Sometimes it began with a laptop, a rented room, a few people willing to recommend your work, and enough courage to send another proposal after the previous one had been rejected. Mutinta pressed enter. The folder appeared. Small, ordinary, almost meaningless to anyone else. She looked around her little apartment, the samples, the invoices, the beautiful new textile, the sketches covering the walls. She was still far from secure, but she was no longer waiting for someone to give her old life back. She was building another one. Mutinta Chisanga stood beneath the brass lettering of Mutinta Interiors and Living, watching sunlight pour through the tall glass windows of her new studio in Kabulonga. For several seconds, she simply stared. The name looked different outside the folder on her old laptop. Real, permanent. Behind the glass, the studio carried everything Mutinta had learned about creating luxury without unnecessary excess. Deep emerald velvet chairs surrounded a locally crafted walnut table. Brass lamps cast warm reflections against cream walls. Framed works by Zambian artists hung beside hand-woven baskets and carefully selected Chitenji textiles. A sculptural console made by a Lusaka carpenter stood beneath shelves displaying ceramics from independent makers. Nothing had been chosen simply because it was expensive. Everything had a reason to be there. "You are doing it again." Mutinta turned. Chanda Firi stood behind her in a magnificent plum Chitenji dress, holding 2 glasses of sparkling fruit juice. "Doing what?" "Looking at your own studio as if security might arrive." and ask who allowed you inside. Mutinta laughed. I am appreciating it. You have been appreciating the sign for several minutes. You counted? I became concerned. Chanda handed her a glass. Mutinta accepted it. I still remember creating the first folder with this name beside my bed. I remember the apartment. You called it efficient. I was being generous. They laughed. Mutinta looked through the glass again. The journey had taken longer than people would probably imagine when they saw the finished studio. There had been no sudden fortune. The Kabulonga guest house led to 2 residential projects. Those projects produced referrals. Some clients paid promptly. Others required uncomfortable reminders. Mutinta learned contracts, deposits, procurement schedules, tax obligations, supplier negotiations, and the painful difference between revenue and profit. She had made mistakes. Once, she underestimated transportation costs so badly that most of her design fee disappeared into deliveries. Another time, a client changed fabric selections after an order had already been placed, teaching Mutinta to document every approval. Gross had been beautiful. It had also been exhausting, but it was hers. Inside, 4 women were preparing sample boards for upcoming projects. One of them, Nalucha Banda, approached carrying a folder. Mutinta, the Leopards Hill client, approved the dining chairs. All 8? All 8. Did they approve the fabric, the green velvet? Mutinta smiled. Good choice. Nalucha hesitated. There is something else. What happened? The supplier wants a larger deposit than we discussed. Mutinta's expression changed immediately. How much larger? Nalucha showed her the figure. Mutinta studied it. Do not pay it yet. I thought so. Call them and ask for a revised invoice with the original terms. And if they refuse, we find another supplier. Nalucha nodded. I will handle it. As she walked away, Chanda watched her. You are good at that. At what? Not panicking. Mutinta raised an eyebrow. I panic privately. That explains your tea consumption. Before Mutinta could answer, the studio door opened. Lungu Mwap entered, carrying a slim black folder. His charcoal suit was softened by a shirt patterned subtly with copper African motifs. He looked around. I see Chanda has already started drinking without me. It is fruit juice, Chanda said. Still disrespectful. Mutinta smiled. You are late. I brought something. He handed her the folder. Mutinta opened it. Inside were architectural drawings. She looked up. What is this? A restaurant project. In Lusaka? Yes. New build, renovation. She turned another page. The space was large, modern, and complicated. This is bigger than anything we have done together. That is why I brought it. Mutinta looked at him carefully. You think we can handle it? Lungu frowned. No. Her face fell. Then he added, I know Ken. Chanda groaned, architect. Why answer normally when drama is available? Mutinta laughed. But Lungu remained serious. I recommended your studio for the interior package. You already recommended us? Yes, without asking me. I assumed you enjoy paying salaries. Mutinta glanced toward her team. That silenced her. Salaries. Years earlier, she had measured security by whether she could pay her own rents. Now other women depended partly on the business she had created. That responsibility frightened her more than she admitted. I want to review the scope before accepting, she said. Exactly why I brought it. Chanda lifted her glass. Look at you two behaving professionally. Very disappointing. Lungu ignored her. Mutinta walked toward the large central table and spread the drawings across it. Nalucha and 2 other designers gradually joined them. Mutinta did not send them away. Instead, she pointed toward the restaurant layout. What do you see? Nalucha studied it. Too many tables. Good. What else? The walkway between the bar and dining section is narrow. Another designer, Temwandi Zulu, leaned closer. The private dining area has no visual connection to the rest of the restaurant. Mutinta nodded. What would you change? The discussion began. Lungu stepped back. He watched Mutinta question her team rather than simply giving them answers. She had become a different kind of leader from the one she had known. That was intentional. Mutinta remembered what it felt like when authority was used to make someone smaller. She refused to build her own success that way. After the team returned to work, Lungu remained beside the table. You could have answered those questions yourself, he said. Yes, why didn't you? Because if they only execute my ideas, I have employees. She closed the drawings. If they learn to make decisions, I have designers. Lungu smiled. That sounds expensive. Everything worthwhile seems to be. His gaze remained on her for a moment longer than necessary. Mutinta noticed. She also noticed that she did not dislike it. But before Isa could speak, Chanda appeared between them, holding a plate of miniature pastries. I can feel professional boundaries becoming unnecessarily interesting. Chanda, Mutinta warned. What? I brought food. Lungu took a pastry. You are becoming increasingly difficult. I am successful enough to afford it. Mutinta shook her head, laughing. The studio door opened again. A woman entered with a young assistant carrying a portfolio. Mutinta recognized the uncertainty immediately. The woman introduced herself as Mwaka Siame, explaining that she had left formal employment to care for family responsibilities and was now trying to return to design work. I know the gap in my resume looks bad, Mwaka said. Mutinta looked at the portfolio. How long were you away? Several years. That was not my question. Mwaka seemed confused. Mutinta tapped the portfolio gently. What can you do now? The woman looked down. I am good with textiles and sourcing. Show me. Mwaka opened her work. Mutinta examined each page carefully. Some pieces were weak, others were excellent. You need to update this. Mwaka's shoulders dropped. I did not say no. She looked up. Mutinta continued. Come back with 3 projects, not 10. Chanda slowly turned toward Mutinta. Mutinta noticed and smiled. What? Nothing. But they both remembered. The same instruction Chanda had once given her. Mutinta looked back at Mwaka. Show me the projects where you solved the hardest problems. Hope returned to the woman's face. I can do that. Good. After she left, Mutinta walked toward the window. Outside, expensive vehicles moved along the tree-lined road. Across the studio, her team worked beneath warm brass lights while Chanda argued with Lungu about chair fabrics. Mutinta touched the old burgundy sample book displayed on a shelf behind her desk. She had once believed success would feel like finally proving Thandiwe wrong. It did not. Success felt quieter. It felt like paying people fairly, choosing local craftspeople when their work deserved the contract, giving someone an opportunity without asking them to perform gratitude for it, building something beautiful without making another person feel small. Mutinta looked at her name on the glass. She no longer needed an expensive address to tell her she belonged somewhere. She had built a place where other women could discover that they belonged, too. Thandiwe Mulenga sat behind the enormous walnut desk in her Kabulonga showroom, staring at a financial report she had already read 3 times. Around her, everything still looked successful. Tall glass windows flooded the showroom with light. Imported sofas in cream bole and midnight blue velvet occupied carefully staged living spaces. Brass chandeliers hung above polished floors. Sculptural coffee tables from Johannesburg stood beside vibrant Zambian artwork. Near the entrance, 2 assistants in elegant navy uniforms arranged fresh flowers beneath the gold lettering of Mulenga Living. Nothing looked broken. That was becoming the problem. Thandiwe, her accountant, Bupe Sakala, sat opposite her in a burgundy suit, a tablet resting on her lap. Thandiwe closed the report. I heard you. Then you understand what I am saying. I understand that you are worried. Bupe's expression tightened. No, I am giving you numbers. There is a difference? A very expensive one. Thandiwe leaned back. Boop had worked with her for years and had earned the privilege of speaking more directly than most people dared. The second showroom is underperforming, Boop continued. The commercial tenant at your Ibex Hill property is not renewing. Import costs have increased, and too much cash is tied up in inventory. We knew expansion would take time. Yes, so we did not know you would expand the inventory at the same time. Thandi looked toward the showroom floor. Customers expect choice. Customers expect a business to remain open. Thandiwe's eyes snapped back to her. Careful. Boop did not move. That is exactly why we are having this conversation. Thandiwe stood and walked toward the windows. Outside, 2 expensive vehicles were parked beneath flowering trees. Across the road, a new cafe had opened with minimalist furniture and a terrace crowded with professionals. Lusaka was changing. So were her customers. Once, imported furniture had represented status. Now, many younger clients wanted locally made pieces, sustainable materials, flexible spaces, and designs that felt distinctly Zambian. Thandiwe had noticed. She simply had not believed the shift would happen quickly enough to matter. "We have strong assets," she said. "You do. Rental income, reduced inventory, which is only valuable if it sells. My name." Bupe paused. "A name is not cash flow." That landed harder than Thandiwe expected. She turned. "You think Mulenga living is finished?" "I think Mulenga living needs to become smaller before it can become healthy." Thandiwe laughed once. "You want me to close the new showroom?" "Yes." "No, then reduce this one." "No, sell part of the excess inventory." "At discounted prices?" "Yes, that will make us look desperate." Bupe placed the tablet on the desk. "This is what worries me." "What?" "You are still talking about how things look." Thandiwe became silent. Bupe softened her voice. "I am not criticizing what you built. You built something impressive. But businesses do not survive because their owners are too proud to change them." Thandiwe looked away. Pride. People used that word too casually. They did not understand what it had taken for her to become the woman sitting in this office. She remembered growing up in a crowded house where every purchase required discussion. She remembered wearing altered dresses passed down from relatives and promising herself she would someday walk into shops without checking every price tag. Nobody had rescued her. Nobody had given her a beautiful showroom. She had built it, and now everyone wanted her to make it smaller. "I know hardship, Bupe. I know. I survived things people working here know nothing about. I know that too." "Then stop speaking to me as though one difficult period will destroy everything." Bupe sighed. "That is not what I am saying. It sounds like it. I am saying your past taught you how to survive scarcity." Bupe leaned forward. "But perhaps it did not teach you how to let go of appearances." Thandiwe stared at her. For a moment, another woman's face appeared in her memory, Mutinta, standing inside that Ibex Hill townhouse with a burgundy sample book pressed against her chest. Thandiwe had told her that discomfort might teach her ambition. She had believed it. Perhaps part of her still did. "People become soft when everyone excuses their problems," Thandiwe said. Bupa frowned. "Who are we talking about now?" "No one." But Thandiwe knew. She had followed Mutinta's career from a distance. Not deliberately, she told herself. Mutinta's work simply appeared everywhere. A boutique guest house, a restaurant, a feature in a Lusaka lifestyle publication. Then the opening of Mutinta Interiors and Living. Thandiwe had once driven past the Kabulonga studio and slowed without intending to. The building was smaller than her own showroom, yet it looked alive. Clients moved in and out. Locally crafted furniture filled the windows. Young designers walked around a central table. Mutinta had not merely survived. She had built something. Bupe opened another document. "The bank wants a revised restructuring proposals." Thandiwe returned to her chair. "How serious?" "Serious enough that pretending otherwise will make it worse." "What are our options?" Bupe's posture relaxed slightly. It was the first practical question Thandiwe had asked. "We consolidate operations. We sell excess stock. You dispose of one non-essential property rather than allowing pressure to spread across the portfolio and the showroom. We redesign it." Thandiwe looked around. "What is wrong with it?" "It is beautiful. Then, it is expensive to maintain, oversized for current traffic, and full of inventory your customers are no longer asking for." Thandiwe folded her arms. "So you want me to abandon the brand I built?" "No." Bupe shook her head. "I want you to separate the brand from the building." That sentence stayed in the room. Thandiwe looked toward the enormous chandelier hanging over a display nobody had purchased in months. Separate the brand from the building. Years earlier, she had told Mutinta to find an address that matched her reality. Now Thandiwe was confronting an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps she had spent too much of her own life believing an address could prove reality. Her assistant appeared at the office doorway. "Madam Mulenga?" "Yes?" "The supplier from Johannesburg is asking about the outstanding balance." Thandiwe glanced at Bupe. "I will call them." The assistant nodded and disappeared. Bupe gathered her papers. I need your decision. You will have it. When? After I review everything. Bupe stood. Review the numbers, Thandiwe. Not your reputation. Then she left. Thandiwe remained alone. The showroom outside continued operating beautifully. A sales assistant adjusted cushions. Someone polished a glass table. Soft instrumental music drifted through hidden speakers. From a distance, success remained perfectly intact. Thandiwe opened the financial report again. This time she did not look at the total value of her assets. She looked at the monthly obligations. For the first time, she allowed herself to see the difference. Her business was not collapsing, but it was asking her to change. And change required something Thandiwe had always demanded from other people while rarely practicing herself. Humility. She picked up her phone and searched for interior design studios in Kabulonga. She already knew which name would appear. When Mutinta Interiors and Living filled the screen, Thandiwe stared at without touching the call button. Years ago, Mutinta had needed a little flexibility. Thandiwe had given her humiliation instead. Now the woman she once considered financially irresponsible had built exactly the kind of lean, locally connected design business that Mulenga Living desperately needed to understand. Thandiwe locked the phone. Not yet. She was not ready to walk through that door. But for the first time, she understood that she might have to. The glass door of Mutinta Interiors and Living opened, and Thandiwe Mulenga stepped inside. Mutinta did not see her immediately. She was standing beside the central walnut table with Nalucha and Mowaka, reviewing samples for a residential project in Leopard's Hill. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating layers of emerald velvet, burnt orange linen, polished brass, and hand-woven textile spread across the table. No, Mutinta said, moving one sample aside. The room already has enough visual weight. Mwaka lifted a patterned fabric. This instead? Better. Why? The pattern is quieter, but it still connects with the artwork. Mutinta smiled. Exactly. Then Nalucha's eyes shifted toward the entrance. Her expression changed. Mutinta. Something in her voice made Mutinta turn. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Thandiwe stood near the doorway wearing a beautifully tailored sapphire chitenge suit with subtle gold embroidery. Her leather handbag was still expensive. Her earrings were still elegant. Her posture still carried traces of the commanding woman Mutinta remembered. But something was missing. Certainty. Mutinta felt the past arrive before she could stop it. The glass-walled townhouse, the silent guests, the burgundy sample book pressed against her chest, the sentence she had spent years refusing to repeat inside her own head. Thandiwe looked around the studio. Her gaze moved across the locally crafted furniture, the artwork, the design team, the sample library. Then she looked back at Mutinta. Hello, Mutinta placed the fabric sample down. Hello, Thandiwe. Nalucha glanced between them. Mutinta kept her voice professional. Could you and Mwaka finish the material schedule in the meeting room? Of course. The two women gathered their folders and left. Mutinta gestured toward the seating area. Would you like to sit? Thank you. Thandiwe lowered herself onto an emerald velvet chair. Mutinta took the chair opposite. For a moment, neither spoke. It was strange. Years earlier, Mutinta had entered Thandiwe's world feeling that every beautiful object around her was evidence of someone else's power. Now Thandiwe was sitting inside a room created by Mutinta. But Mutinta felt no triumph, only caution. I have seen your work, Thandiwe finally said. Mutinta nodded. I assumed you might have. The Mukuni restaurant is yours? My team worked on the interiors. And the boutique guest house? That was one of my earlier projects. It is beautiful. Thank you. Thandiwe looked toward the central table. You have built something impressive. Mutinta studied her face. Did you come here to compliment my portfolio? Thandiwe almost smiled. No, I didn't think so. A silence followed. Then Thandiwe placed her handbag beside her. My business is changing. Mutinta waited. The larger showroom is no longer sustainable in its current form. That happens. Thandiwe looked surprised by the absence of judgment. We expanded too quickly. Mutinta said nothing. I carried too much inventory. Some of our imported lines stopped performing. One of my commercial tenants did not renew, and the pressure spread further than I expected. Still, Mutinta waited. Thandiwe seemed to realize that she would not be rescued from the discomfort of saying what she'd come to say. I am consolidating Mulenga living into one showroom, a smaller one. How much smaller? Almost half. Now Mutinta's professional instincts took over despite herself. Existing building? Yes. Furniture inventory? Some will be sold, some transferred. Are you changing the product strategy? Thandiwe nodded. More locally produced pieces, less capital tied up in imported stock. Mutinta leaned back. That sounds sensible. My accountant said something similar. Accountants occasionally do. A tiny smile appeared on Thandiwe's face, then disappeared. I need someone to redesign the space. There it was. Mutinta's hands became still. Thandiwe continued. I have spoken to 2 firms. Their proposals are good, but the costs make no sense for a business trying to reduce overhead. And you came here. Yes. Why? Thandiwe glanced toward a display of locally woven baskets. Chanda Mutinta almost laughed. Of course. She told me you understand how to make a smaller budget feel intentional rather than compromised. That sounds like Chanda. She also said you would tell me no if the project made no business sense. That sounds even more like Chanda. Thandiwe looked directly at her. I need that. Mutinta felt something uncomfortable move through her chest. Years ago, she had stood before this woman asking for a few days. Now, Thandiwe was sitting before her asking for expertise. The reversal was almost too perfect, and that was precisely why Mutinta distrusted the satisfaction it offered. Why me? She asked. I just explained. No, Mutinta leaned forward. You explained why my company might be suitable. I am asking why you walked through this door, knowing our history. Thandiwe looked down at her hands. For the first time since entering, she seemed older than Mutinta remembered. Because my business cannot afford marriage anymore. Mutinta said nothing. Thandiwe exhaled slowly. I could pretend this is purely practical. It isn't. It is practical. She paused. But I also knew there was something I would have to face if I came here. Mutinta's eyes moved toward the shelf behind her desk. The burgundy sample book was there. Thandiwe followed her gaze. Recognition appeared immediately. You kept it. Yes, I remember that book. So do I. The air changed. Thandiwe looked away first. I was cruel to you. Mutinta had imagined hearing those words before. In some versions of the fantasy, she felt victorious. In others, she delivered the perfect response and walked away. Reality felt different. Quid you were? Mutinta said. Thandiwe nodded. I thought I was teaching you something. You taught me several things. Thandiwe looked at her. None of them were what you intended. That landed. Thandiwe swallowed. I suppose not. Mutinta stood and walked toward the shelf. She did not pick up the old book. Not yet. Instead, she looked through the studio window at the city beyond it. Do you know what was hardest about leaving Ibex Hill? The apartment? No, Mutinta turned. Believing you, Thandiwe's expression changed. For a while, I believed struggling financially meant I had somehow become less disciplined, less intelligent, less worthy of beautiful things. I shouldn't have. No, Mutinta raised one hand gently. Let me finish. Thandiwe fell silent. I eventually learned that a difficult season can expose your finances without defining your character. Mutinta glanced around the studio, but I also learned something else. People remember how you treat them when you have power over something they desperately need. Thandiwe lowered her eyes. I remember. Mutinta returned to her chair. So before we discuss your showroom, you should understand something. Thandiwe looked up. If I take this project, you will not receive special treatment because of our past. I am not asking for it. You will pay my team. Yes. You will pay our suppliers according to contract. Yes. If the budget cannot support something, we remove it. We do not pressure craftspeople to absorb your losses. Thandiwe nodded. Agreed. And I will not turn this studio into a place where anyone is humiliated because their circumstances changed. Thandiwe held her gaze. I understand. Mutinta reached for a blank project intake form. She placed it between them. Thandiwe looked down at it. Does this mean you are accepting? No. Mutinta's voice was calm. It means I am willing to look at the problem. A strange mixture of relief and humility crossed Thandiwe's face. That is more than I expected. Mutinta slid a pen towards her. Then start with the truth. What can you actually afford? Years earlier, Thandiwe had looked at Mutinta's financial difficulty and seen a character flaw. Now she opened her handbag, removed the real figures of her struggling business, and placed them on Mutinta's table. No performance, no luxury illusion, just numbers. Mutinta looked at them. For the first time, she understood that the true reversal between them was not that one woman had risen while another had fallen. It was that Thandiwe had finally entered a room where she could no longer use success to hide from vulnerability. And Mutinta now possessed the power to decide what kind of woman she wanted to be when someone vulnerable sat across from her. Thandiwe Mulenga sat across from Mutinta Chisanga in the private consultation room of Mutinta Interiors and Living, with the proposed redesign of Mulenga Living spread across the walnut table between them. The numbers were honest now. No oversized displays intended to impress visitors. No imported pieces chosen merely because they carried prestigious labels. No expensive finishes that would force the business to stretch itself further. Mutinta had reduced the plan to what Thandiwe actually needed: a smaller showroom, a stronger local identity, better circulation, flexible displays, less inventory, more breathing room. Thandiwe studied the presentation board. You removed the Italian lighting. Yes, that chandelier was part of our identity. Mutinta looked at her. Was it? Thandiwe frowned. Customers recognized it. Did they buy more furniture because of it? Thandiwe said nothing. Mutinta turned another page. I replaced it with fixtures fabricated locally. They cost less to maintain and we can adjust them when your displays change. Thandiwe touched the drawing. And the marble reception desk? Gone. That desk cost a fortune, which is not a reason to spend another fortune designing around it. Thandiwe leaned back. A few years earlier, Mutinta might have softened that answer. Not anymore. She had learned that professionalism did not require shrinking her expertise to protect someone else's pride. What happens to it? Thandiwe asked. Sell it. You make letting go sound very easy. It isn't. Mutinta closed the presentation folder. But sometimes keeping something because it once proved you were successful becomes more expensive than admitting you no longer need it. Thandiwe looked at her carefully. The sentence was about furniture. Both women knew it was not only about furniture. I approve the direction, Thandiwe said. Mutinta nodded. Then my team will prepare the final cost schedule. Thandiwe did not stand. Mutinta noticed. Is there something else? Yes. Thandiwe folded her hands. I owe you an apology. Mutinta became still. You already acknowledged what happened. I acknowledged that I was cruel. Thandiwe shook her head. That is not the same as understanding why. Mutinta waited. Thandiwe looked toward the glass wall, separating the consultation room from the main studio. Beyond it, Mwaka and Nalucha were working beside a sample wall, while Chanda inspected a newly delivered armchair. I spent years telling myself that hardship had made me strong, Thandiwe said. Perhaps it did, but somewhere along the way, I began believing anyone struggling simply had not become strong enough. Mutinta listened without interrupting. When you could not pay the full rent, I did not see someone who had lost her job. I saw everything I had spent my life being afraid of becoming again. Poor, powerless. That answer surprised it, Mutinta. Thandiwe continued. I thought if I judged weakness harshly enough, it could never return to my own life. And now? Now I know circumstances do not ask permission before changing. Silence settled between them. Mutinta stood. She walked to the shelf near the consultation room and reached for the burgundy sample book. Its edges were worn. Some labels had faded. A few fabric pieces had begun separating from their pages. She returned and placed art on the table. Thandiwe stared at it. Do you remember this? Yes, I carried it the night you humiliated me. Thandi lowered her eyes. I remember. Mutinta opened the book. I had just come back from an interview. I didn't know. You didn't ask. Thandiwe flinched slightly. Mutinta continued calmly. I had already sold things, got expenses, applied for jobs, taken freelance work. I was trying. I know that now. No, you know because you can see what happened afterward. Mutinta leaned forward. But that is not the lesson. Thandiwe looked at her. The lesson is that I deserve dignity even if none of this had happened. Mutinta gestured toward the studio beyond the glass. Even if I had never opened this business, even if I had taken an ordinary job, even if I had needed years to recover. Thandiwe's eyes grew moist. Mutinta did not look away. My success does not prove that humiliating me was wrong. Her voice softened. Humiliating me was wrong when I had nothing to prove. Thandi slowly nodded. You are right. There was no defense attached, no explanation, just acknowledgement. I am sorry, Mutinta. Mutinta looked down at the old fabric samples. For years, part of her had imagined this moment. She had imagined Thandiwe needing her, imagined having the perfect opportunity to say no. But sitting there now, revenge felt strangely small. Not because Thandiwe deserved immediate forgiveness, because Mutinta no longer wanted her decisions controlled by an old wound. Why are you helping me? Thandiwe asked quietly. Mutinta closed the book. I haven't decided whether I am helping you. Thandiwe looked confused. I am doing my job. You could have refused the project. Yes, you had every reason. I had reasons. Mutinta paused, but I also had a choice. She pushed the design proposal gently towards Thandiwe. I spent too long believing strength meant never needing anyone again. Then I looked around and realized my entire business exists because people open professional doors for one another. Tanta, yes. Lungu, him too. Mutinta smiled faintly, and clients who trusted me before I had an impressive studio. Craftspeople who gave honest advice. Women who recommended my work when there was nothing in it for them. She looked directly at Thandiwe. Mercy does not require me to become your victim again. Thandiwe swallowed. Mutinta continued. I can treat you with dignity without pretending you treated me well. I can forgive without forgetting the boundary that experience taught me to build. Thandiwe nodded slowly. So what happens now? Now? Mutinta opened the contract. You pay the deposit. For one startled second, Thandiwe stared at her. Then she laughed. It was not the polished laugh Mutinta remembered from Ibex Hill. It was warmer, almost relief. I suppose I should have expected that. My employees do not accept apologies as salary. Thandiwe smiled. Fair enough. She reached for the contract. Before signing, she paused. Mutinta? Yes? If our positions had been reversed again, I am not sure the woman I was have done what you are doing. Mutinta considered that. Then perhaps it is fortunate I am not trying to become the woman you were. Thandiwe signed. Mutinta watched the pen move across the paper. There was no victory music, no audience, no public humiliation returned to its sender. Just two adult women sitting across from each other with history between them and a contract beneath their hands. Thandiwe had consequences to face. Mutinta had boundaries to protect. Forgiveness would not erase either. When Thandiwe left the consultation room, Thanda entered almost immediately. Well, she signed. That is not what I meant. Mutinta knew. Chanda looked at the burgundy sample book. How did it feel? Mutinta thought for a moment. Quicker than I expected. Disappointed? No. Mutinta ran her hand across the worn cover. Free. Chanda smiled. Outside the glass walls, Lusaka continued moving beneath the fading light. Mutinta returned the sample book to its shelf. For years, it had reminded her of the night someone tried to measure her worth by what she could afford. Now it represented something different. The woman Mutinta had become when she finally possessed enough power to return humiliation and chose not to use it. Warm light spilled through the windows of the newly redesigned Mulenga living showroom in Kabulonga. The building was smaller now, but it no longer felt diminished. Locally crafted walnut tables stood beside elegant chairs upholstered in deep emerald and burnt orange fabrics. Brass fixtures illuminated hand-woven baskets, Zambian ceramics, sculptural lamps, and carefully selected artwork. Instead of filling every corner with inventory, Mutinta's team had allowed the space to breathe. Nothing was pretending to be larger than it was. For Thandiwe Mulenga, that was perhaps the most important part of the redesign. She stood near the entrance wearing an elegant ivory chiton dress patterned with cobalt details. Around her, clients, suppliers, craftspeople, and business associates moved through the showroom with glasses of sparkling juice. Mutinta watched from across the room. You are staring again, she turned. Lungu Mwap stood beside her in a dark tailored suit. I am observing. That is what you said at your studio opening. You remember too much. I am an architect. Remembering details prevents expensive mistakes. Mutinta smiled. Chanda appeared beside them in a dramatic burgundy gown. Are you two flirting at a business event? No, Mutinta said. Yes, Chanda said at the same moment. Lungu laughed. Mutinta shook her head. Why do I continue inviting you? Because your events would be painfully tasteful without me. Before Mutinta could answer, Thandiwe approached. There you are. Her expression carried nervousness Mutinta had rarely seen in her. The clients like it, Thandiwe said. They should, Chanda replied. My chairs are excellent. Thandiwe laughed. They are. She turned toward Mutinta. I want to thank you publicly. Mutinta's smile faded slightly. For the project? For more than the project. No, Thandi blinked. No? Mutinta lowered her voice. You can thank the team. You can acknowledge the craftspeople. But please do not tell our personal history to this room. I thought it might show people how much I have learned. Then show them. Thandiwe looked confused. Mutinta continued gently. Not every apology needs an audience. The words settled between them. You do not owe me public humiliation because you once gave me public humiliation. Thandiwe looked toward the guests. I thought acknowledging it publicly might make things right. It might make you feel that you have balanced something. Mutinta paused. But I do not need that. What do you need? Consistency. Thandiwe became quiet. Mutinta gestured toward the showroom. If you have changed, let your employees experience it. Let your tenants experience it. Let your suppliers experience it. A faint smile touched Mutinta's face. That will mean more than a speech about me. Thandiwe nodded. I understand. When she eventually addressed the room, she thanked Mutinta Interiors and Living, the local makers, the upholstery team, and the employees who had helped restructure the business. She did not tell Mutinta's story. She did not make herself the heroine of an apology. And Mutinta noticed. Later, Thandiwe found her near a display of hand-woven lamps. I wanted to tell you something. Mutinta waited. I changed the rental policy. Mutinta's expression sharpened. What do you mean? I still require rent to be paid, as you should. But tenants who have a documented temporary hardship can request a structured payment arrangement before they fall too far behind. Mutinta studied her. You created that because of me, partly. Thandiwe glanced around the showroom. Mostly because I finally understood something. What? Compassion and poor business management are not the same thing. Mutinta smiled. That took you a while. It did. And if someone repeatedly refuses to pay, they still have to leave. Good. Thandiwe laughed. You sound more like a landlord than I do. No, I simply believe boundaries work better when they are not decorated with humiliation. Thandiwe's laughter faded into something more thoughtful. I wish I had understood that earlier. Mutinta looked at her. You understand it now. It was not absolution. It was enough. Across the room, Mutinta noticed Mwaka speaking confidently with a potential client. The woman who had once entered Mutinta's studio apologizing for a gap in her resume now held a sample board beneath one arm and explained textile choices with calm authority. Mutinta felt an unexpected swell of pride. Lungu joined her again. You look happy, I am. Because of the showroom? Not exactly, she nodded toward Mwaka. Because of that. Lungu followed her gaze. She is good, she always was. She needed someone to notice. Mutinta shook her head. No, she needed somewhere her skills could become visible again. Lungu looked at her. There is a difference, a large one. Mutinta remembered Chanda asking to see 3 projects years earlier. Not offering charity, not promising success, simply opening a professional door. Mutinta had once told herself that she rebuilt her life alone because that story felt safer. If she needed nobody, nobody could disappoint her. But standing inside Thandiwe's redesigned showroom, she could finally see how incomplete that belief had been. Chanda had opened the door. Lungu had trusted her expertise. Clients had recommended her. Craftspeople had shared knowledge. Employees had strengthened her company. Mutinta had done the work, but independence had never meant isolation. Walk with me, Lungu said. They moved toward the quieter edge of the showroom. I have a question. That sounds dangerous. Do you ever miss the Ibex Hill apartment? Mutinta stopped. Of all the questions she expected, that was not one of them. She thought about the marble counter, the emerald cushions, the view, the evening she had packed her belongings into boxes. No, nothing? Mutinta considered it again. I missed something else. What? The woman I was before I thought losing that apartment meant losing myself. Lungu's expression softened. Mutinta looked through the showroom windows. I spent years trying to prove Thandiwe had been wrong about me. And she was wrong. Lungu smiled. That sounded easy. But I eventually realized I did not need this studio, successful project, or an impressive address to prove it. She turned toward him. I had dignity when I could not pay the rent. Yes, I just didn't know how fiercely I needed to protect it. Lungu reached for her hand. Mutinta let him take it. No dramatic promise followed. No declaration that everything difficult had happened for a reason. Some pain did not need to become beautiful to become useful. Across the room, Thandiwe was speaking with one of the local furniture makers, listening rather than directing. Chanda was laughing with Natucha. Mwaka was still talking to the potential client, and Mutinta stood quietly among them. Once, she had believed success meant reaching a place where nobody could ever look down on her again. Now she understood something better. She could not control how people measured her. She could control whether she accepted their measurement. Money changed, addresses could change, businesses could rise, shrink, recover, or disappear. But dignity was never something Thandiwe had possessed the power to take from her. And mercy was never something Mutinta owed simply because she had become successful enough to give it. Both were choices. This time, Mutinta had made hers freely. Mutinta Interiors and Living entered its strongest season yet, but Mutinta measured success differently now. Mwaka became a permanent designer, Naluka began leading her own projects, and Sanda's workshop expanded after receiving new connects from clients who discovered her craftsmanship through Mutinta's studio. Mulenga Living also stabilized. Thandiwe never returned to the oversized lifestyle she once considered proof of success, and surprisingly, she no longer wanted to. Her smaller showroom became profitable. Her relationships with suppliers improved, and her new rental policy helped struggling tenants communicate before temporary difficulties became permanent crises. Most importantly, she learned to listen without immediately judging. Mutinta and Lungu continued building their relationship slowly, choosing partnership over performance. One evening, Mutinta stood inside her studio surrounded by fabric books, drawings, laughter, and building careers of their own. She looked at the old burgundy sample book on the shelf and smiled. She had once carried it while leaving a home she thought represented everything she had achieved. Now she understood that the most beautiful home she had built was not an expensive address. It was a life where success no longer required anyone else to feel small. Mutinta's journey reveals something deeper than the familiar lesson that circumstances can change. Never confuse someone's difficult season with their permanent value. A late payment, lost job, failed business, smaller home, career break, or financial setback tells us what someone is facing, not who they are. But the story also carries another lesson. Forgiveness does not require surrendering boundaries. Mutinta could acknowledge Thandiwe's growth without pretending the humiliation never happened. She could offer professional help without working for free, abandoning her standards, or making herself responsible for fixing another woman's life. That distinction matters. Compassion without boundaries can become self-neglect. Boundaries without compassion can become bitterness. Mature strength can hold both. Mutinta also discovered that independence does not mean doing everything alone. Her success grew through Chanda's introduction, Lungu's professional trust, clients' recommendations, craftspeople's skills, and her team's work. Accepting honorable support does not diminish a woman's strength. Sometimes the greatest evidence of healing is not reaching a position where you can finally hurt those who hurt you. It is reaching that position and realizing you no longer need to.